Good evening. All right, welcome to Electronic Illustration. Tonight we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to do a breakdown of a really cool day I had a few years ago. And quite a few years ago, I was on this trip through the northeastern United States. I realized in the United States, I'd driven across it twice from the east to the west coast, and I'd been in a lot of places, but I'd never really explored the far northeastern corner of the United States. And so I took this vacation, this trip, rented a car, and went to like seven different places while I was up there. And one of the things I found when I was looking for, tourism things to get into was the Norman Rockwell Museum. And we'll talk a little bit about Norman Rockwell if you're not familiar with him. But while I was at the museum, they also had a gallery of fantasy art. And this had some of the original works by some of the best in the business. Frank Fraceseta and this fellow who did the illustration for Brandon Sanderson's The Stormlight Archive. And the works were just absolutely amazing. I took all these photos and I was just really inspired to be able to teach this digital illustration course. So this is going to be me doing my best impression of David Attenborough and and talking through what makes for a great illustration. So I think that this first painting is sort of showing the pinnacle of maybe what a lot of you guys think of when it comes to illustration, right? This is a master class in lighting, in composition. There's a huge environment that's being painted here. It's got so much detail, so much interesting lighting that's going on, and it's telling just a really, really powerful story between this king or this knight looking over the edge and then sort of saluting his sword to this other character off in the distance. There's where our narration hits, but against them we also have this huge storm front that's coming in as well. And I can't tell you how many beginning illustration students I've seen use this look where we've got a character that is facing nature. And that gets into the different types of conflict, right? So you can have man versus nature, man versus himself, uh, when you're doing illustrations. But and in a scene like this, it's pitting the human, us, the audience, the human element against the vastness and the grandeur and the overwhelming power of the natural world. Um, it's an absolutely beautiful painting, but there's a lot more that we can do with illustration besides this, which is great. If you feel called to do this, go, you got 20 years ahead of you of work to figure this stuff out. But let's look at some other really cool examples of illustration. So way back in the day, I used to have a project in here, which was the two-color illustration. And I think that this one is a really cool fantasy piece as well. Where we're using, anytime you're using like really bright, like oranges and reds with a blue purple background, you're always going to get a lot of contrast. And I would just file in the back of your head that browns work really well for the buildings within compositions like this. And it can be really nice because you can see that transition, that magic happening there with this gradient from the yellow to the orange to the pink to the purple to the blues right in this little section. And what a nice color scheme that can create. So if you've never painted a picture or done an illustration with this color scheme, I think everyone should do it at least once to get it out of your system. This is extremely eye-catching because of the hots and the cools that are taking place. And there's a website full of like movie poster tropes that goes through and shows you like how many action movies have been created that use this high contrast lighting setup between the bright oranges and the blues. The dragon is painted absolutely gorgeous here. I think that the artist did a wonderful job with the highlights on the character's leg and still not neglecting those shadows. That can be a little bit tricky when you're doing this type of stuff. But one of the other things that really makes this painting pop and work so well is that we've got the full moon framing the dragon's head, but on the back of the full moon, that gives them an excuse to be able to create rim lighting going all the way around. And this is not realistic. This is not realistic lighting. This is fantasy all the way. So all our tools of design are turned up to 11, and you can see just how bright that rim light really is, going around the character's thigh, on his hands here, on catching the edge of the dragon's claw as well. It's all really, really nicely done. And the rim lighting is your best friend. Our secondary lighting, so we've got sort of our main source here from the explosion, and then the secondary lighting that's coming from the environment, even in a night scene, is is something you should consider and keep in mind. Over here on the left-hand side of the composition, I think it becomes a little bit dead. This becomes a little bit boring. There's a lot more interesting stuff to be able to tell the story of the town that we're in, even though I guess that's not really the story. The story is all about this dragon wreaking havoc on this building right here. But compositionally, this part on the lower left-hand side is a little bit boring and a little bit stale and feels like an afterthought for the one of the best dragon renderings you are ever going to see. Okay, here's another one that I like an awful lot. So this is a painting from Lord of the Rings, or of Lord of the Rings, and we've got Gandalf hanging out with either Bilbo or Frodo there inside of the Hobbit's home. And one of the beautiful things about this painting is we've got lighting coming in from the left-hand side, right? So we've got that naturalistic lighting, just like we saw with the previous painting, where you've got a warmer light source, and then you've got a cooler light source that's happening within this shot. The same thing's happening here, where the hearth is always warm inside of a hobbit hole. And you can see just how the artist is using that rim light again on the character right around the edges here and transitioning it in. And then we've got really bright flares happening on his sleeve also. And that gives us an excuse to be able to light the underside of the chin, which would have otherwise kind of faded into the background, and a little bit around the edge of the hair too. But notice how they're using a lesser hue, right? So if we look over here on the left-hand side, this is super, super saturated and super bright. And we think about the dissipation of light. So in another video, I was talking about, imagine having a candle in a room, and the light from that candle is only in a dark room. That light from the candle is only going to travel so far. The same thing is happening here, where the light is dissipating. So by the time we make it over to Gandalf's face, Gandalf the Gray here, that those highlights are still there. You can see it on his nose right there and on his cheeks a little bit, but it's not nearly as strong. And one of the other things I really like about this painting a lot is as we start to examine it and get into some of the close-ups, we'll see the painting technique. I think that sometimes as beginning illustrators, we're still focused on the composition and the story and getting the expressions right, and still thinking from the lessons that we've learned before that you can lose the eyes to be able to see the structure and the methodology that this artist used to be able to paint this picture. So I'm going to show some close-ups of it right now. And this is really, really cool. So for a lot of y'all, if you're just starting off with illustration and digital illustration or painting and working with color, your solution might be to say, okay, this window seal is made of wood, so it's going to be brown, and that's it. Maybe we'll have a slightly darker brown on the for the spots that aren't catching the light. But this artist has gone through, and we've got pinks, we've got blues, we've got whites, we've got some yellow that's happening inside of this highlight that's all coming together to create a beautiful illusion of the light from the outside, that little bit of sky, peeking its way into the window seal. The same thing's going on within our shadow regions as well, is our shadows aren't just one color when we're working with really nice illustrations. Instead, we're building up the different hues and tones within this shot. And you can see that maybe there's some lacquer on here, so there's a little bit of light reflecting from the fire. And they're really constantly thinking about not just the object that they're painting, but how the light is interacting with that object as well. There's better close up of all those different highlights going on, but we can see the same thing occurring, right? So within the teapot, we've got a whole bunch of different hues that are going on within the teapot. So you can actually see the reflection from the window in it, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a great way to think through it, always thinking about the light within the scene. We got a little bit of green that's going on there. And then when we look at the shadowed regions on this character's shirt and on the trousers, there's quite a variety of different hues that are going on to be able to make this brown leather color. And what they're doing is they're pulling colors from the rest of the painting and working those colors through the entire composition so that we don't get local color and local color regions within our shot. There is a time and place for that, but this is a much more painterly approach. And this is something that no one ever really talked to me about when I was in art school. They just sort of put the still life out there and they were like, all right, paint this, see how you can do. And didn't no one ever talked to me about like why you actually should do these things. So when it comes to Gandalf's beard, we got the same thing going on. Look at all the different colors that are making up the actual beard. We've got the light that's going on. We've got some wisp of the bluish white on there. There's some pinks that are also these same colors are being used to build up the character's face as well. And it's a really nice gestural study. I think that another thing to keep in mind too is that when we get into this and we start breaking, like really breaking the painting and getting this close to it to where it becomes not a shoulder anymore, but a series of different brush strokes, that this can become really useful when we think about the way that we're making our marks within our scenes, right? So this section of the character's beard, yeah, they're not going through and painting every single hair on the beard. They're letting it be a little bit fuzzy. Yes, there's still the impression of beard strokes running throughout here, but the artist knew when to be able to show restraint. And this little section I think is really nice when it comes to um, movement of the hair, as well as having a variety of different strokes for giving the overall impression that we're looking for here. And it's just it's really expertly done and just a really nice character study. Same thing goes even when you've got a dark robe on the character. There's got some brown. They got some deep olive greens going on in there. So black is never just black. A white beard is never just a white beard. Always be looking for moments where you can add those other colors into the scene. This one's cool. So previously we talked about this artist won like Illustrator of the Year somewhere. And this was done for Game of Thrones, I think like season two or three. And this is such a cool illustration. This is completely different than what we've been looking at before, where it starts to move from the painterly classical techniques into more of a modernist graphic design approach to illustration, but it still tells an incredible story. And compositionally, this entire thing is working well. We've got really strong lines breaking through with the king's hand ornament from Tyrion, and then it's stabbing right through the Lannister lion. The lion is totally done in the medieval style. And the thing that I really liked about this one that I wanted to share out is, you can see that they're using big swaths of color and how this is broken up, right? So you've got the red background, the yellow lion, the gray hand, the green dragon up here, but polish within digital painting and illustration is a really important aspect of this game that you guys are entering into. And I don't know if anyone's ever explained this to you. That's kind of the way that I look at it, is that, even if you're just starting out, you are joining a great conversation, a great book that's being written about painting and illustration and storytelling. And your lifetime, you are adding to that very colorful and very interesting conversation. So it's important to know and to be a student and to study. If you want to be a writer, you're gonna go read books and really dissect how writers are structuring their paragraphs and their prose. Or if you're going to be a chef, can you imagine going to culinary school and you never try anyone else's cooking and appreciate it? And you just say, nope, I don't need any of that. I'm just going to put what I feel that I should put into the pot, and this will come out great, and everyone's going to absolutely love it. No, 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 no. You're contributing to different areas of the illustration landscape as you would with any of the other arts as well. So here's a close-up of that same painting, and we can see just how refined and nice the lines are on Tyrion, right? So it's got the almost like wood carving lines that are going on with it. His beard is extraordinarily detailed. Within the the dragon itself, there's all types of really, really sharp, refined, nice detail that's going on within this character. And this is a serious illustration. This took this artist a good long while. When we look at the hand of the king, again, we're getting kind of that print, pixelated, textured look that's going on with it. That just helps it so much to have a presence and then to be able to stand out, but not just a pure solid color. So line work is cool. Having great line work is really nice always, but there's a lot of different varieties and things that you can do with line work. So if you've got a character that's all black, rim lighting helps a lot, or being able to go in there and change your line color so that it's not just a standard black line and these areas are getting lost, or around your line to be able to make that line itself, sharp on the outside and then, a gradient going towards the inner portion of it. It There's just some other options that you can think of. And so that's what this painting again looks like when we get really far back. Hope this is helpful for you guys. Thought this one was really beautiful as well. There we go. So talk about some just remarkable use of light within this painting and the way that it works across the character. So this is Beauty and the Beast, and we've got kind of an Art Nouveau look to it with the graphic patterning going on within the painting, and then it's a weird blend between the two because then we've got very, very realistic lighting that's happening. Beautiful composition, tells a great story with the expression, classic with the beast right behind the character. But here's what this looks like when we go in and look at the details on it, right? So the artist has chosen to make the rose the most important thing within this painting. And they're doing that by creating the highest areas of contrast. I think for many of you guys right now, you're when you're painting, you always think, oh man, I've gotta really highlight the face. I've got to get, if that lighting's coming from the top left-hand side, there's going to be all kinds of highlights. We're going to put the lighting on the cheek and the nose and on the chin, and it's really, really going to stand out. That doesn't always have to be the case, right? You can choose something besides the character's face. This object suddenly becomes the most important part within this illustration. And the artist, even though they're working with such abstraction and pattern and design here, when they are using lighting, they're using it in a very, very intelligent way. We got another one with the guy facing away from the scene, but I really like this one an awful lot because it tells such a neat story, right? We'll see another painting of someone looking in a shop window here in a little bit, but you know, think about the objects that you're putting in your scene and how they help to tell the overall story and the narrative. If we just had a painting of a guy looking into, a shop window, it doesn't become as interesting as it is when he's clearly looking into a magic store. Oh, this is a good point. If you ever find yourself doing a tavern or an apothecary or a bar or a witch's hut or something like that, libraries, any scene that is going to have a lot of repetition in it, oh, this is a great solution. Consider blurring some of these objects out. Hide all those objects within the shadows if you can, so that you don't have to add quite so much detail to each and every one of them. I've done a couple libraries throughout my career, and painting book after book after book, it becomes madness, and that type of detailing can really drive you crazy after a while, especially drawing square after square after square. So, yeah, think about how we can take away some of the detail and some of the work that we have to do by casting things within the shadows. Let me see if I can find another example of that. Casting things in the shadows. Let's see here. Oh, okay. That'll work for me. So this one, we've got what's happening within this piece? So I guess, yeah, he's got a different colored tunic on. So maybe he's talking to a knight from the, oh, he's giving a report of what he's seen and he's just returning. Yeah, there we go. Really nice composition here. We've got a beach painting mixed with sky and a little bit of, classic kind of seaside hills over on the left-hand side. This is pretty common within this sea painting genre to make the shadows this sort of purple color, and then using this grayish green in the that they're using on the hills. I really like and appreciate that this artist understands how big of a pain in the butt castles are to paint, and that he's left that castle really far away. He could have made that castle take up the entire left-hand side of this painting and go all the way up here to the top of the scene, but it would have fought visually against the story happening between these two characters, right? And so they're using diagonals, they're using the clouds to be able to frame this shot with some of the highest levels of contrast happening right in this region between the knight's helmet and the highlight and then the bright cloud behind him. So it really draws your attention in there. And I think this is a good example of hiding some details within the shadows, right? It's a super bright scene on the beach, but instead they've let those shadows become quite a bit darker. And when it comes to the chainmail, they haven't broken their hand trying to do each piece of this chainmail. Instead, they're only doing the parts that are actually hitting the light. And then the other stuff underneath here is just sort of fading away into the shadow regions, which is really, really nicely done. And I think it's a smart solution. I like how they're using the background characters effectively to be able to show them just coming to shore, and the background characters are also helping to frame. So we're creating repetition between um, the paddles going up in the air, and then we've got the color tunics, the little pops of color, the red, the green, the yellow, that are also bringing some of those reds and greens and yellows that are on this guy's tunic, the feather, and then a little bit in his face to be able to create a nice rounded color block and little pops of it so that it has a good rhythm going throughout the entire scene. Really, really cool piece. Same thing again, this artist could have gone through and rendered that sand until their hand fell off, could have rendered the water for absolutely ever, but they've left some of these things loose and been really, really precise about where it is that they're deciding to put the details within the scene. And I think that overall, it's got enough breathing space. You can almost like feel the sea air when you look at this one, and you really feel like you're standing within this scene. One of the other interesting portions of it, I think that's pretty cool that you might not notice at first, that you might want to consider doing while you're doing your own illustrations, is this sort of classical technique where we've got a gradient running through the uh, fellow's legs so that the leg color ends up being more closely related to the sea, so that as we move into the darker regions, it's a cool little illustration technique, a neat little mechanic that they've put in here so that our eyes don't focus on this negative space as much between the character's legs, and it doesn't create too much blocking, but instead it pushes our eyes up to the story that they want them to tell, which is the handshake, the hand on the shoulder, this guy coming back with his hands in a little bit of an erratic gesture, and the story that's being told between these two fellas. Really, really nice picture. Let's stay in the fantasy realm, but I want to show you one of my favorite ones now. So this is probably my favorite illustration from looking at this collection. And I thought this was so cool. So often when you start doing illustrations, you start doing animation, you want to tell this huge world building system with this intricate like magic system. And here's how the spells work. And, we're going to do a fight scene. And this character is, fighting for his life, and it's world stakes that are on the lines. But there's space, and I think there's definitely a time for it now with how much time we spend on our seat on our screens and how many action movies and explosions we've seen over the years in films, to where that stuff's starting to get a little bit stale, and that these smaller stories from the heart start to mean a little bit more than the world-ending stakes of the say the Marvel movies, right? Where everything is a world-ending event and it becomes a little bit tiresome after a while. And instead, showing a witch on her broomstick, finding a black cat in a pet shop in the middle of the night is just a wonderful little moment between these two characters. Now, don't get it twisted, this artist is using a lot of great compositional skills to be able to really sell this illustration, and this is masterfully crafted. Um, you know, if we look at the shape of the witch, she's got a good through line, a good S shape going on through her. The broomstick is pointing our direction, so we're creating kind of an arrow with her body, a cup, a backward C to be able to frame the kitty cat. The kitty cat itself is got an outline or a glow around it to be able to help it stand out even more from the background. I think maybe the artist felt like he was getting lost in those grays a little bit and wanted to just bring our attention to it even more, which I thought was really nice. All the other cats within this shot have got a lot of personality with the way that they're sleeping, and you can get a sense of the personality of each one of those cats. And I think that it was absolutely necessary to show the other types of uh, spotting and patterning on cats to be able to make the black cat stand out even more. One of the things that I also really like about this painting is the top left-hand side inside of the shop at night. It would have been so easy for this artist to make all of this stuff inside the window just completely black out and totally dark. But instead, because we want the audience to focus on the black cat and the witch and the relationship between the two, they've left this a gray. And the gray is causing it not to grab so much attention and allows it to be able to fade into the background so that we can really focus on the area of the highest contrast right here within the lit window. Now, again, there is a lot of detail that's going on within the background of this scene. We've got a moon that's got clouds going over it. We've got a busy city scene. We've got a taxi cab. We've got lower shot windows. There's glass. There's stuff reflecting through the glass. There's probably some objects, something for sale in that shop down there. And the artist has done a really nice job of, as things move further away, letting those details uh, start to dissipate. They're also same thing, right? As the shop window, would have been really, really easy to make this the blackest black within the scene since it is outside and it's night. But instead, they've chosen to make the blackest areas on this painting the witch's hat, as well as the cat also. And by letting these grays within these buildings become sort of a hue of gray. You can see you've got a warm one and then a cooler one right next to each other. It helps to separate them out so that they don't get lost as well. So there's a lot of cool color theory that's going on in this illustration, as well as telling an absolutely beautiful story. And compositionally, we've got the shape of the witch. That's juxtaposed to the cat stretching up against the window, but we're also using the lighting from the shop on the ground. And then you've got those same lights that are moving back, and everything is there to be able to direct your attention right towards the cat. So we've got some really, really good compositional skills within this scene that's all helping to build this story. And this is an excellent small stakes narrative that's going on. And that's sort of the power that illustration can really have. It doesn't have to be these massive battles or fight scenes. Instead, you can tell smaller, more intimate stories, and I think that there's a lot to be learned and appreciated from that. Speaking of telling smaller, more intimate stories, perhaps no artist has done it better than the Sunday evening Sunday Tribune. I can't remember the name of it. Anywho, Norman Rockwell, the guys whose museum I was actually at, and Norman Rockwell was a great orator of American society and sort of painting this bygone era that never really existed. This is one of his more famous ones that you might have seen before, him doing his own self-portrait. And there he is looking in the mirror, painting himself while he's drawing himself, and it's just these quirky little moments that he was able to capture. Norman Rockwell, came to find out from being in that museum, was an absolute workaholic. This guy, even on like Christmas Eve, when Christmas dinner would be ready, and his wife would have to come out to his studio barn in the backyard and have to kind of pull him back inside away from the work that he was creating. And I know that feeling. I remember being in my 20s and not making a lot of money off art, and I always felt like I had to be producing. And I've never really stopped producing an absolute ton, trying to be able to support myself within this crazy field. I want to show you some other smaller stories from Norman Rockwell. Where to go? So there's that one, but that's not the one I want. Let's go big here. Extra large icons. There's one of a dude pushing a baby stroller that I want to show you. You're probably going to see it before I do. Huh, looks like that painting might have disappeared from here. Bummer. That's okay. Look at this one. So this is a pretty famous one of his. That's, a lot of his themes um, idolized the youth and the innocence, or had an element of mischievousness to them as well. And I think that this painting really highlights the power of illustration and the freeze frame moment, right? So we've got these young men who are running away from with their clothes half on, grabbing their drawers, and then there's a sign there that says no swimming, and clearly the boy's hair is nice and wet. They were swimming, and I just love the dog within this shot as well. Instead of doing a full, drawn out dog, instead the dog is right in the middle of his gait instead of the extended gait, and it creates this weird rabbit-like composition on the scene. The dog is in on the mischief as well, and is running off. And then we've even got the muddy feet that he's gone through and painted. One thing that Norman Rockwell was always exceptionally good at was characters' expressions, right? And capturing just that kind of look. So I really like this one on the kid's face as well while he's running off, and we can't quite see that boy, but yeah, that's a really strong facial expression. Here's how he got there. So for each one of Norman Rockwell's paintings, he would do a ton of research before he went through and painted it. Here we go. He would pick out people from the town that he lived in, and he'd bring them into his studio, and then he'd photograph them, or he'd do a charcoal study of them. And he would have him come in and sit for these paintings. So he wasn't coming up with these beautiful character expressions completely on his own. He was using and photographing live models, and then working from these live models to be able to get to his final result. And yeah, he's awesome when it comes to the character illustrations that he was able to do and pull off, right? I think that is such a strong expression. And this is the type of stuff where, if you are drawing from your head, your brain is going to work on the cheekbone. It's going to pull the chin out further. You're going to have the line going on the edge of the lips. You're never going to push the lips that far up to the edge of the frame. It's not going to feel natural to you. And this is the type of stuff that you find when you're doing life studies, or really getting into photographic references for facial expressions on human faces, that comes together in such a strong way to be able to tell the story better than just drawing it out of your own head ever could. There's some more great facial expressions from that same study sheet. So Norman Rockwell did a study, a series of paintings right after World War II ended, and it was called The Four Freedoms. And it says, bring the past and the present together. They're fundamental values of the world we would leave to our children. was the idea here, and he was commissioned to illustrate them. And I can't remember what they all are. Unfortunately, this isn't a video on the history of Norman Rockwell, but just some absolutely beautiful juxtapositions of themes that are going on with this Native American family suddenly seeing the dam being erected out there in the desert from their tribal homeland, and sort of the imposition of technology and modernization onto, a more naturalistic lifestyle. Uh, Beautiful, beautiful theme that he's dealing with. And I would just encourage, oh, there it is, found it. Finally got to the one I was looking for. So I would encourage you guys to dig a little bit deeper with the themes that you're using for these illustrations to be able to tell, not the most complex stories, but rather you're telling moments that are occurring, and you're trying to do it in the best way that you possibly can. I absolutely love this illustration of the boy having to walk his new little baby sister, while the rest of the boys are getting to go off and play the ball game, and you can see him just trying not to make eye contact while he has to do the family chores, and the other guys are getting to have some leisure time, and that little pinky up in the air says it all. And I think that this is a really cool little moment that he was able to capture between in the world. I don't know how the heck his head worked for this type of stuff. All right, check out the four agreements and read a little bit up on them if you're interested later on. But I'm just going to show a few more paintings that I think are really, really neat and interesting to look at that tell great stories. So this one, we've moved a long ways off from our classical Renaissance style paintings into something that is much more illustrative and a lot more evocative with the line work that's going on, right? So this one is just so neat where it comes to an old grandpa that's telling a story to the kids, and then the way that the artist is using the shadow within this scene to be able to really highlight sort of the fear that they're feeling inside of their head while he's reiterating this. You instantly know he's not just talking about, his favorite type of tea, or, a great meal that he had in Paris 40 something years ago. Instead, he's telling a dangerous tale. And I think that the line work here is just expertly done. I really like how it gets darker around the character's face, even within the shadows, for what's the most intense and most interesting. And then the artist is allowing that breathing room, ever so slight, with the lines getting less intense as we move away. Pretty smart little technique in there. Trying to think. I want to do one more. All right, yeah, let's end it with the beginning. So here is Frank Rosetta. Hope I'm saying his name right. Uh, but this guy, with like a single painting that he did, he was super down on his luck. He was having trouble getting gigs. He was totally broke. And then he did one painting and of like Conan the Barbarian, and they ended up using it for the novel series back during the 1920s, and it just totally changed the landscape and the imagery of how we think about fantasy inside of our heads. And there have been 1,000 imitators, but there's only one original for this, for someone being able to work within this theme and this type of genre. And this is your action shot, right? We've got a full-on battle scene that's going on here. We've got characters getting thrown everywhere. Our hero going up against impossible odds with this giant orc or monster creature. But the thing that's so cool about this painting is that they've allowed what are the details that are actually going on. So when we go down to this bottom left-hand side, we've got a sea of shields that are all really, really loosely rendered. There's the impression of hands, some swords, there's some impression of a character back here in the background, but everything becomes completely melded together in this frantic, energetic brushwork that's extremely loose. allowing for areas of high contrast as we move towards the back. This is unusual as well. I would use atmospheric perspective or the fog of war to be able to fade those characters into the distance, but instead he chooses to create a darker contrast between this and the sky, which leads us up into the banners and the spears, letting you know just what a large battle this is. And by using the schmear here, um, in blurring out some of this, you can really feel the action and the intensity of the moment. And as we start to look at the character itself, right? So the character's skirt or kilt or whatever that they're wearing is extraordinarily expressive. We've got almost like Japanese watercrest waves going on within this highlight on the character's knee, and then splashes, literally splashes of white that are contained within it to be able to give it a rough, energetic type of feel, just like an ocean wave crashing. When we look at the back rendering of this character, we've got a wide variety of different brushwork that's going on. So some of these brush marks around the teeth are really, really tight, right? We get this black shape inside of the character's mouth that makes up the interior of the mouth. It starts off thick, it gets thin as we get to the edge of the jaw. But then he's using really, really wide, expressive, layered pieces of paint to be able to paint the back muscles within this character while still at the same time keeping a sense of the lighting that's going on throughout the entire scene. And then these are almost gestural figure studies that are going on up here that are once again probably painted on the base with like a brown ochre. And then he's just layering up some washes on top of them to be able to get this rendering style that looks really, really cool and really nice. And look how much white space he's left between the distance between these two characters. Um, and this is just pure white, nothing else in there between the two of them. But he's still allowing the blacks to be able to show us the character's expression and the deep darkness of their eyes as well. And yeah, it's just a really, really cool painting that's going on. So I have been talking about this stuff for a while. I hope this gives you some things to be able to think about when it comes to your own illustrations, how you approach stories, how you approach composition, the way that you use color and lighting and line for your brush marks. And yeah, you guys have a great evening.